I would like you to speak about the two paintings by Munch.
Well, we have two really stunning pictures from different periods in Munch's career coming up in London later this month. And they have quite a distinguished history, but also a fascinating dialogue between the two. The first picture, called Summer Day, is from a commission that Munch had for a patron called Max Linder in Lübeck in Germany. It was actually a commission for a children's nursery. And it depicts for Munch, very sunny, upbeat, happy summer day on the fjord with a sailing boat. When Max Linder received the group of paintings this came from, he decided that they weren't perhaps the most appropriate imagery for a children's nursery, and so he gave them back to Munch. And Munch added this really extraordinary spectral couple on the left that are actually translucent. You see through the figures, and that adds a very dark element to this happy summer day. So that's one picture. It's from 1904, the early period of Munch's career. The second is from a very different Munch, a self-portrait from 1926, one of the greatest of all self-portraitists, of course. Munch is, from the age of 18 right through to the end of his life. He paints this unbelievable sequence of self-portraits that really reimagine what self-portraiture can be for the 20th century. And this one, 1926, he's 62 years old. He's the squire of Eckerley, one of these grand estates that he owned at that point outside Oslo. It's a very professional Munch facing the world. This is a time when he's become one of the most famous artists in the world. He's in the Carnegie, for example, in 1927.
Really?
And he's representing, it's easy for us to forget that. Munch was many things that people don't realize. One of them is that he was an incredible self-publicist. He created an artistic persona, and he represented himself for the most part. While he worked with dealers sometimes, but he represented himself, and he created this artistic identity, which he used his prints in particular to spread out around the world. So he was incredibly well known at this point. And he's looking back in this 1926 painting to Velázquez, to Goya, to Rembrandt, to sort of old masters, in representing himself with his palette to the world. But it's also in the clouds above his head. You get that kind of that feeling of interiority and emotion that, of course, underscores all his best work.
No, but in fact, this period is also a period of promotion for him in terms of organizing show and all that, more than painting, right? There's no more innovation.
I'm sorry, I don't quite follow the question.
But no, it's not a question, it's a remark. I mean, obviously in the 20s, he has done all his career. He's organizing a lot of important shows, his promotion, his posterity, more than painting.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's right. He's very conscious of building that artistic persona. And I think there's been this, from my perspective, quite erroneous division of Munch's work into a pre-1907, pre-1908, when he has his breakdown and spends a year in Dr. Jacobson's clinic in Copenhagen, and the work after that. The historical view, when I was an art history student, was that, you know, it was the early work, it was the Frieze of Life, the Kiss and the Scream and Madonna and Vampire that was the work that had real value. And after that, he became something much less important. Whereas I've always felt, actually, there are fascinating things going on in Munch's later career. He's painting for a long, long time. And some of his finest pictures actually date, like Between the Clock and the Bed, for example, one of the great late self-portraits, date from the final years of his career.
But how is the market? How does the market react?
Munch is a market like no other. In the 20 plus years that I've been working with Edvard Munch, we have gone from the world record price being just under $8 million in the 90s. We then sold Summer Day for just under $13 million in 2006. And then followed that by The Girls on the Bridge at $31 million, Vampire at $38 million. And then when The Scream sold in 2012 at Sotheby's for 120, that was the most expensive painting, a work of art of any type that had been sold at auction at that point. So you've got a progression of value there, which reflects critical interest in Munch. He's one of those artists that appears more and more important with every passing year, not less. And it is quite an astonishing trajectory when you consider that to where we have today. Munch is one of clearly The Scream is arguably the second most image in the whole of the history of art. But I think there's a greater interest and a greater understanding of Munch's career today, both critically and commercially, than we've ever seen.
Yeah, because The Scream was hiding the rest of the
True.
production in a way.
I think that's a fair comment, that it was just so famous. It was the one thing that it totally transcended Munch, Expressionism, Norway, even painting. It's something else. It's a phenomenon on the screen. And actually, as a result, the rest of his work perhaps put a little in the shade. There have been, however, in the past 20 years, a great series of exhibitions. Munch is very well served by the Munch-Museet and also the curatorial establishment. We've seen important Munch shows at the Royal Academy, at the Tate, at the Pompidou, at the Art Institute of Chicago, at MoMA, to name just a few there in the past 20 years. Because the other thing about him was, I've always felt Munch is tremendously important to the history of art. With Van Gogh, Munch really creates expressionism, the idea of painting not what things look like, but what they feel like. And because all of his great work, with a few notable exceptions, is in Oslo and Bergen in public institutions, if you haven't been there, it's hard to understand why he is so important.
That's true.
And so these great exhibitions in the US and elsewhere in Europe have helped that along, I think. Tracy Emin and Edvard Munch at the Royal Academy being just the latest in London, an amazing show, kind of looking at Munch, his later work in particular, from a new angle. It's not about The Scream and it's not about The Frieze of Life. It's about his nudes and his interiors and kind of the interiority of his later years.
But so it means in terms of art markets, the later years are less expensive, you think, or not today?
The top prices for Munch are all Frieze of Life pictures, as I mentioned, the Vampire, the Girls on the Bridge, the Scream. But I think that reflects the very limited supply of major works by Munch that ever come to the market. The Self-Portrait and Summer Day that we're offering in London later this month are the two most important works by Munch that we've seen on the market for